On Easter Monday 1916, a maximum of 1,500 rebels took to the streets of Dublin in rebellion and proclaimed an Irish Republic. A short-term failure, yet a long-term success. This is the story of the Rising. I'm Miss Murphy and welcome to the Junior Cert History series. In order to understand the 1916 Rising, we need to look back at the political, social and cultural context of Ireland at this time. This is the focus of episode 1. So, what was the political situation of Ireland in 1916? The Act of Union had been in place in Ireland since 1801. This meant that since then, Ireland was ruled directly from Westminster. This means that the Parliament in England made all the decisions for Ireland, and Ireland did not have its own Parliament. The politicians elected for Ireland went to Westminster to take their seats. This included 105 Irish MPs. The head of state was King George V of England, and the Viceroy, aka Lord Lieutenant, represented Ireland on behalf of the King. At this time in Ireland, the majority of people in Ireland were nationalists. They were mostly Catholic and desired some sort of independence for Ireland. Most nationalists supported the Home Rule Party at this time, officially known as the Irish Parliamentary Party. They were led by John Redmond and wanted a limited amount of independence for Ireland. This was called Home Rule and would mean that Ireland would have its own Parliament, which would decide on Ireland's internal affairs, such as health and education, but Westminster, the British, would decide on Ireland's external affairs, and Ireland would still be a member of the British Empire or Commonwealth as it was now called. The Home Rule Party had about 80 MPs in Westminster. Another political or military group in Ireland at this time was the IRB, or Irish Republican Brotherhood. They were a secret, oath-bound society set up in the mid-20th century by James Stephens, who was dedicated to the establishment of an Irish Republic and the complete overthrow of British rule in Ireland. Members joined in secrecy and swore an oath of allegiance to fight for an Irish Republic. In the early 20th century, the IRB had just been reorganised by old-time Fenian Tom Clarke and Sean McDermott in Dublin. They were radical nationalists and were a minority. They were following along the lines of tradition from Wolfe Tone and the 1798 rebellion. Another political group in Ireland were the Unionists. These were a small minority on the island of Ireland, but were a majority in the northeast corner of the country. They wanted to remain in union with Great Britain, to remain part of the United Kingdom. They had the Unionist Party in Westminster, and in 1910 they had 20 MPs. Key Unionist leaders included Edward Carson and James Craig. Now on to the cultural groups. During this time, Ireland was suffering from Anglicisation. This was the spreading of English customs and culture. The Irish language and culture was under serious threat. Many people were playing English games such as soccer and rugby, and only 14% of people spoke Irish at the time. A number of groups emerged in an effort to counteract or prevent this. These included 1. The Gaelic League. This was set up in 1893 by Owen MacNeill and Douglas Hyde. The aim of the Gaelic League was to stop the decline of the Irish language. They sent volunteer Irish teachers around the country called Timuri. Their newspaper, called On Clive Sullis, was edited by Patrick Pearse. They also encouraged Irish language and dancing. The second cultural group that you need to know include the GAA. They were set up in Thurles in County Tipperary by Maurice Davin and Michael Cusack. Their main aim was the promotion of Gaelic Games. They established rules for Gaelic Games and organised official competitions. It was hugely successful and had clubs established even in London, where Michael Collins was a member. The third cultural group you need to know of at this time was the Anglo-Irish Literary Revival. These were poets and playwrights who wrote about ancient Irish traditions and legends in the English language, many of which were being wiped from popular knowledge, such as the story of Cú Chulainn, etc. They wrote poems and their plays were featured in the newly formed Abbey Theatre in Dublin. The poets and playwrights included W.B. Yeats, Lady Gregory and John Millington Synge. One of the most famous plays staged there was the playby of the Western World by Synge. It is very important to understand that all of these cultural groups were secretly infiltrated by the IRB. Now we will talk about the social context in Ireland prior to the Rising. On the eve of 1916, there were almost 26,000 people in Dublin living in tenement slums, some of them living in what were described as the worst living conditions in Europe at the time. Jim Larkin tried to organise and unionise the unskilled labourers in Dublin in the early 20th century. The union was called the Irish Transport and General Workers Union, also known as the ITGWU. By 1913 it had 10,000 members. The aim of the union was to unite workers to strike for better wages and working conditions. In August 1913, the employers in Dublin, led by William Martin Murphy, who was owner of Cleary's department store, the United Tramways Company and independent newspapers, told its employees that members of Jim Larkin's union would be locked out of work unless they left the union. They refused, and in the 1913 lockout, the workers found themselves literally locked out of their places of employment for 5 months. They eventually had to give in due to starvation and hardship. Larkin then left for America, but very importantly, during this event, a number of workers on O'Connell Street were baton charged by the Dublin Metropolitan Police, and 2 were killed, over 300 were wounded. This prompted James Connolly, another ITGWU leader, to establish the Irish Citizen Army, a workers' army with the aim of protecting workers against baton charges from the police. It was the only army in the world that allowed females to join as complete equals to the men. Connolly and the Irish Citizen Army were planning a socialist revolution for Ireland. They later played a significant role in the Rising instead. So, to sum up today's episode, the Act of Union in 1801 closed down the Irish Parliament and brought in direct rule from Westminster. Most nationalists in Ireland supported John Redmond and the Home Rule Party, who wanted semi-independence for Ireland under the British Commonwealth. Unionists, a minority, wanted to remain in union with Great Britain. A minority of nationalists wanted to establish an Irish republic completely separate from Britain. Anglicisation was spreading in Ireland, and a number of groups such as the Gaelic League, the GAA and the Anglo-Irish Literary Revival were set up to counteract this. They were infiltrated by the IRB. The 1913 lockout in Dublin happened, leading to the formation of the Irish Citizen Army, who were planning a socialist rebellion, but later joined up with the IRB and the Rising instead. This is all we will cover in this episode. We will see in the next episode that a major political event occurred in Ireland in 1910 that drove the country to the brink of civil war, with 2 opposing armed militias openly marching throughout the streets of Ireland. Will civil war be prevented? Subscribe and stay updated on the next upload, and post in the comments below if you have any questions or information to add. I'm Miss Murphy, thanks for watching.